Welcome to our question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Hello, Chris. I have a quick question. Can you read Revelation 7:4, also 14:1?
Okay, Revelation 7:4. It says, "And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel." And then in 14:1, "And I looked, and lo, a Lamb stood on the Mount Sion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads."
Okay, we say that this has to do with the New Testament church age, 144,000. And then immediately after that is the great multitude that came out of great tribulation. God talks about those two periods. Why doesn't he speak of the ones that were saved in the Old Testament, being that he's kind of putting them all on display up in heaven? Do you know why that is?
Well, yeah, I do. I know what you're asking. And, well, first of all, we have to remember that there were very few saved in the Old Testament. The Old Testament is the longest period of time. If we look at the sum total of time on earth, the Old Testament lasted, we could say, until the birth of Christ, or we could say to the cross, but it was over 11,000 years. 11,000 years of Old Testament history, and we find just scattered individuals for the most part that were saved, with a couple of exceptions where God speaks of 7,000 that did not bow the knee in Israel, indicating they were saved, and then the dramatic and great salvation that took place at Nineveh. There was 120,000, we're told, in the city, but I don't know if we can say that many were saved. But without any doubt, the salvation that took place in the city Nineveh was the great multitude of the Old Testament. And that was done for a reason. They were also non-Jews. And that also is done for a reason, because it is picturing God's plan after he ends the church age, as the Jews typify the church. And it's outside the church during the second part of the Great Tribulation, the great multitude saved. So Jonah is commanded to go out of Israel to a foreign land, and there we read of the greatest salvation in all 11,000 years of Old Testament history. But beside those two statements, 8 souls on the ark and a few here, a few there, and even if 120,000 were saved in Nineveh, that's still hardly anything. It's very unlikely that even 1 million people were saved over the course of the entirety of the Old Testament period, 11,000 years. So that's one reason, whereas the church age, though not as many people were saved during the church age as we might think, yet far more than during the Old Testament time. And then the Lord saved the best for last with the salvation of the great multitude during, again, the second part of the Great Tribulation, about 17 years. And so in order to lay it out, it's laid out in the form of rain and harvest. And so the Lord speaks of 3 rains in Joel chapter 2. The early righteous rain, which span the Old Testament. And I don't know, Mr. Camping also was a little uncertain about exactly when the early righteous reign began. At one point he said throughout the whole Old Testament, another point he mentioned beginning with Abraham, but I can see why he was uncertain, because it's a little hard to pin down. However, given that the early righteous reign was to produce the fruit of the Lord Jesus Christ, then I would think it was the whole Old Testament period, because right from the beginning, the Old Testament was pointing to the coming Messiah, when the Lord would enter into the world and become the first of the first fruits. So there is a reign that identifies with the Old Testament period of time, and then there's 2 other reigns. Early reign, not early righteous reign. Early righteous reign is the Old Testament. The early righteous reign, followed by the early reign that began on Pentecost in 33 AD and stretched until 1988. And then in 1994, in the Jubilee year of 94, the latter reign began. So it's tempting to say, well, then the early righteous reign is the reign that all those saved in the Old Testament identifies with. But no, that's not the focus. The focus is on the fruit, who was Christ. He was the first of the first fruits typified by the wave offering. And so when Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist in the River Jordan, that fulfilled the harvest. As each rain produces a harvest, the crop, the Lord Jesus became the harvest himself of the whole Old Testament early righteous rain. And then, after his baptism for 3.5 years, it was akin to a famine, as each period of rain was followed by famine. So the Old Testament history, up until the baptism of Christ, the rain fell, the fruit comes, the harvest is there, 3.5 years of famine for the length of Jesus' ministry, followed by rain, the early rain on the day of Pentecost, and more fruit coming in over the course of 1955 years. Then, in 1988, another famine. At the end of the church age, the rain stops, a famine, and there are always famines of hearing the word. A famine takes place on May 21, 1988 for 2,300 evening mornings. Then on September 7th, 1994, more rain. The latter rain. And then God completes his salvation program on the date of May 21, 2011, followed by, Judgment Day. And it's interesting that the Bible doesn't really describe Judgment Day as a famine, although it speaks of the water being dried up and no salvation, which are results of spiritual famine. You know, the same thing that applied to the spiritual famine for the 2,300 evening mornings, virtually no one being saved, applies to our present time. But you see, the times and seasons as far as the harvest have concluded. The early righteous rain, Old Testament, famine, Jesus' ministry, rain, New Testament church age, famine, ending the church age, latter rain, saving the great multitude, and then that's it. Although, again, the conditions that are in the world today would qualify as famine, and maybe there's a verse somewhere that would indicate that, but that's the way it's laid out. So, as far as your question directly, where do those Old Testament saints come in? They were saved under the time of the early righteous rain falling, but again, God does not picture Christ along with them. It's not viewed in that way. But Jesus is the centerpiece. He's the main focus. And that's why we tend to lose sight of all those Old Testament saints. But, they had their salvation. Nobody's going to take that away from them. And when we read Revelation 7 with the 144,000 followed by the great multitude, that's looking ahead to the New Testament era. From the point of Revelation, it was all future. So there's no need for God to look back to the Old Testament saints.